Thanks for joining us for another episode of this Tune Into Tourism series focused on the Outlook 2030 strategy and how its 4 key priorities relate to tourism businesses now, 2 years after its launch in a vastly changed world. The priority we're looking at today is thriving places. So who better to join me first than the new chairperson of the North Highland Initiative, Genevieve Duhigg. Hi Genevieve, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, great to be here, thank you.
Tell me a little bit about what the North Highland Initiative does.
Yeah, so I don't know how much you know about NHI or North Highland Initiative. So it's almost 20 years old now, the charity, and it was originally set up by His Royal Highness Duke of Rothesay to bring together communities. So it seems very appropriate that we're talking today. So that was the original intent. And in fact, even then, the original intention was to focus on 3 areas, tourism, and the economics around tourism, farms and farming, and we can talk about that because increasingly tourism, farms and farming do cross over as farmers diversify their businesses, and then communities and the infrastructure required. So what started out perhaps as 3 quite distinct areas have over the last few years really become completely interlinked. So I'm sure we'll touch on all of those today.
And what are your current priorities?
Yeah, so we're really focusing on the 3 core areas that we always have done. I'll do briefly a little bit on the farms and farming. So we have a business that sits underneath NHI called North Highland Products. And that really is run for the benefit of our farmers. And we act as a sort of honest broker, really, for lamb and beef farmers in the area. And where we provide routes to market specifically through ABP and Dumbia, who have been brilliant partners for us the whole time, and also through Sainsbury's. So we put our North Highland products into quite a large number of Sainsbury's stores across the UK. We also run May Selections, which is the Castle of May branded range of products. And so all of those monies go back to our farms, farmers and producers, but a small amount is kept by North Highland Products, and that goes back to North Highland Initiative. So that's one of the ways that North Highland Initiative raises its money in order to redistribute to the communities. We also have been running for the last 2.5 years a community infrastructure programme, working with partners at Dounreay, but also with the Highland Council, and also obviously putting our own funds in. And we've actually funded over 100 community projects in the last 2 years, trying to help communities invest in and build some projects in their own areas that might help tourists stop and linger and stay a bit longer.
Now, within the strategy's key priority for thriving places, it does aspire for everyone to have a responsibility for managing the impact of tourism in our environment. How are you trying to do that?
Yeah, so there's 2 real areas really. One is the community awards, which we talked about, and those have really been important, I think. They weren't my idea, I wasn't there, but I think the board have done a good job of creating quite an easy way for people to access relatively small amounts of funds between £1,000 and £1,500. Although there's no limit on how many times you can apply as the project progresses, and we're keen to find projects that we can get behind for the longer term as well.
So what kind of projects?
So specifically around tourism, we've been helping communities pay card machines onto toilets, public toilets. So one of the challenges is, as you know, people have tried to charge for toilets, but they've tended to put sort of relatively old-fashioned coin machines in. Most people don't carry cash now. They want to pay with their card or even with their phone. So we've been helping communities invest in that. So they can have a source of income, not really to generate a lot of income, but it costs quite a bit of money to keep public toilets open, and more communities are having to take responsibility for those. So that's a sort of impact management area. On the other side, it's about trying to get a good experience for tourists when they come to our area. and get them to really see how beautiful not only the countryside is, but also our towns and villages. So helping communities invest in their gardens, in their local floral displays, in woodlands, helping them find sort of routes around which might need some path maintenance and those kind of things. Obviously, we're also remain closely connected to North Coast 500. And we were the initiator of that, and we're still a shareholder in North Coast 500. So working closely with North Coast 500 management team to say, you need to find ways to communicate and talk to our residents and understand what's really happening in their areas.
Yeah, quite a challenge,
Mm.
especially, I mean, in some ways a victim of your own success,
Yeah.
in some ways on the North Coast 500, just because it's been, so attractive for people to come and come they have. So in terms of if there are tourism businesses watching just now that are in your area, now, and how far does it extend?
So it's Caithness, Sutherland, Ross and Cromarty. So, pretty much the whole of the North Highlands.
Yeah, and if there are businesses that aren't already engaged with you, tourism businesses that maybe could be potentially able to get some help from you, some support with projects that they're trying to, that they require funding for, how can they do that?
Yeah, so you can just go to the website, North Highland Initiative, and there's a link on there, and I think it's 2 pages long, the form. So it's really simple. We try to turn it around within a week. And we'll come back to you on that. So those are really community projects, but sometimes we do find that communities and businesses, particularly in our area, work very closely together. We do require you to have found some other funding as well, but that might be common good funding or a small amount of wood, discretionary funding. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it's really just to say, is this project going to happen? And that's one of the ways that we found is very useful. In terms of businesses and tourism businesses, you can just get in touch with me, and that's we can put the link in the notes, but it's chair@northhighland.co.uk. That's it. So I'm pretty easy to find, and the email's on the website as well.
Where do you see the most appropriate growth in your area, sort of that will benefit both businesses and the community?
Well, I think, one of the things I feel very passionately about is that communities have to decide that. I'm really not a big believer in top-down people telling each other what to do, because every community is different. Every small town or village has a different set of priorities, or they're on a different sort of journey themselves with tourism. So I really think one of the things I want North Highland Initiative to do is support communities with their own decisions and their own plans, not be saying, this is our plan, so we'd like you to follow it. So I feel that's very, very important as we go through the next 10, 15 years compared to the last.
Yeah, well, you touched on there working together, and of course collaboration is going to be key for the success of communities in the future. What other what ways have you seen success through businesses working together on tourism projects particularly?
Yeah, so I think I think one of the big opportunities we've got coming up is really place planning. And starting to really see this being built into National Planning Framework 4, but also new legislation which is requiring councils to make sure that communities are consulted before new infrastructure programmes are put in place. I mean, that's always been the case for roads or parking or speed limits, but this really goes beyond that into all sorts of areas: housing, recreation, business and skills development. And it's really, I think, going to embed that every community has a real say in what's going to happen to them in the future. And that's going to have to bring together community councils, community interest companies, for-profit businesses, social enterprise, in a way that probably hasn't had to happen before. Some communities have done it. There's a really good example, I don't know how many people have seen it, but Northwest 2045, which is a new place plan which is being pulled together on the West Coast. And it's really worth a look at. You can just Google Northwest 2045. It's a really good example of how, you know, schools, health centres, businesses, communities have come together to say, what do we want from our area? Similar piece of work took place in Brora, which actually North Highlands Initiative helped fund a few years ago, Brighter Brora. And that's, again, these are multi-year programs of work, potentially decades programs of work. But you have to start somewhere and you have to have a plan, and then you can measure yourself against it. But also communities have got transparency. They can see what people are talking about in their area.
Yeah. And feel invested in as stakeholders in that future.
Yeah, and be part of a project team or part of a steering committee to say, well, I think this is going well or it's not going so well. And I think, you know, that more and more businesses are trying to connect with the communities, and do so in explicit ways. And we see that, again, Brora is a really good example of that.
So you touched on it at the very beginning when you mentioned farming, but how are tourism businesses in your area diversifying?
We are seeing farmers think about, how can I use my land differently, both for tourism but also for climate regeneration and move to net zero. So I think you're going to see big diversification, and it will be a sort of strange mix probably of, how do I let people park their camper vans on my land? Do I have any buildings that I could turn into accommodation or other visitor attractions? And, you know, what else is happening on my land that I could either do wind, solar, or peat regeneration and generate carbon credits from?
In terms of new tourism businesses or products or experiences, where do you think there's going to be opportunities, particularly in the North Highlands?
Well, I think, again, this is, there'll be better brains than I, and everybody knows what they want to do in their own area better than I do or we do at NHI. We can help facilitate things. But I do think this move to slower travel is very important, and Venture North have done a lot of work on this, as has Westeros, Live Like a West Coaster, and the Venture North Slow Travel and Highland Time, I think, are all really good examples of everybody just slow down. You don't need to race around the edge of our coastline in 4 days, because the North Coast 500 is great, and it definitely brings people to the area, but we want people to experience the area and see what it's really like. Not just sort of have some miles on a clock that they need to tick off. There will be some people that want to do that, and that's fine. But I think the real opportunity comes in helping people stay a bit longer, and sort of live like we do for a few days, a bit slower, enjoy the outdoors, and maybe just sort of sit and look a while rather than just constantly be on the move. So I think experiences that help with that, cycling, walking, water sports. We've seen some really interesting businesses growing up, haven't we, around paddleboarding and canoeing, kayaking. We're extremely lucky. We've got all these fantastic natural assets.
Yeah, so giving opportunities to engage with nature and the great outdoors. So just to go back to the North Coast 500, as I said earlier, been so incredibly successful, but there have been issues thrown up by that success. What are the sort of things that you are dealing with now in that regard around the North Coast 500?
Yeah, so I think there's a management team there which sits separate from us, but I'm slowly getting to know them and spending some time with them and understanding the work that they've been trying to do in this area. I think definitely a lot of their marketing has changed over the last sort of year, 6 months as well. They're definitely more in the stay longer, slow down, get off the beaten track, don't just stay on the kind of the route, as it were. There's more to see here than that. They've been working closely. There's 6 really pinch point communities that we all know: Applecross, Betty Hill, Durness. And I think the team there have been sort of working with the businesses in those areas, but also starting to think about how they engage more with the communities. But I think it's vital. We've got to, it might be an unintended consequence, but it is a consequence. It has happened. There is an impact. There are definitely areas where the numbers are too much and too big, and we've got to help those communities understand what they can do, not just to manage the impact, but maybe even to slow down a bit, which feels a bit counterintuitive. Do you want to slow down growth? Well, yes, I think so in some cases, and we shouldn't be afraid to say that. And we might have to be very proactive about how we do that and how we manage that. But again, that has to be community-led. It can't be NHI saying this is the right thing, or North Coast 500 saying this is the right thing. It's got to be community-led, and the key for North Coast 500 and for NHI is to be able to listen and hear it and react to it.
It's an exciting time, it's a challenging time, but hopefully by working together we can really make the most of the opportunities that are there.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I'd encourage anybody who thinks they're not being heard, please get in touch with us.
Genevieve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great, thank you very much.
Like many communities in the Highlands and Islands, Kinlochleven has benefited from the formation of a community trust, which exists to support the community to develop, thrive and be sustainable. We went to visit and to find out how the priorities of the Outlook 2030 strategy have helped them to achieve their own goals. Here's Lucy Cook, the Trust General Manager.
It's a busy day in the village today. We've got the Scottish 6-day trials bikes here. We've got walkers from the West Highland Way. We're outside the beautiful Blackwater Hostel today, which is full of all the pods which support the West Highland Way. I say all year round, but mostly seasonal, and the big events like the trials bikes. We were originally set up after the closure of the factory and industry here for socio-economic regeneration. So it's always been at the heart of what we do it is tourism really, because we live in such a beautiful area. We facilitate a lot of tourism. It's kind of been changing over the last few years as we get more and more people here. The West Highland Way was built to come through the village. So we get a lot of walkers, and we've seen an increase in camper van tourists as well. We also get big running marathon events. I think it's down to a lot of things. It's the geography and location of the stunning mountains that we're set upon. We've got beautiful roads in and out of the village as well, and lots of car parking. One of our biggest challenges is trying to balance the needs of our community with the tourists, who I guess are another type of community that we get, like a visiting community. We've seen such an increase, especially with things like COVID, changing things as well, and we've had a different type of resident over the last few years too. People move here to enjoy the location, the peace, the quiet, and we are increasingly seeing more and more visitors, which is incurring some sort of large impacts on the ground. So as the Trust, we've been trying to manage that. I think that the best thing we've been able to do is to hold our own strategy, which was in 2020, in order to just start having conversations with people on the ground. It works well with the national strategy. And it does talk about that balance a lot. It's certainly not straightforward. Not all of our residents and even businesses find the tourism easy, but you can see there's a real mix of conversations and opinions around it, and I think everybody agrees that people are coming, so it's better to try and facilitate and help them visit in a way that it doesn't impact the environment or the people that live here. So in order to do the strategy, it was actually all thanks to a Nature Scot fund called Better Places. We were actually able to employ a consultant. I do have a background in consultancy myself for community consultancy, but we're just so busy and we just run so many things that to get a consultant to come in and work with us and do a lot of that was just amazing. So over a few months we were able to set up questionnaires, surveys, individual one-to-one conversations across the village, loads of different tenants of ours, businesses, not just tourism ones. It was really important to try and get a fair view across our community and start sort of seeing what the feeling was on the ground. The beauty of that fund is that they actually then set out other rounds where you could go for capital funding to create infrastructure. To be honest, a lot of it wasn't news to us in the strategy. I think we all kind of had a bit of a feeling of what would come up, and it was around the impacts of the increased tourism in the area. So quite simple things like toilets, car parking, signage, appropriate places for people to spend time overnight, how much accommodation we have and whether there's an issue around that, which there is. We run, I think, generally over 100% capacity for accommodation here. So we're seeing an increased amount of camper vans in the area and campers as well. and you know, I mean, the trials bikes are a great example of that because a lot of them come in camper vans and there just aren't enough facilities to manage that. So we've been slowly building waste facilities and parking. And we own quite a few of the car parks in the village and the interpretation that goes with that. So the funding has really enabled that quite quickly comparatively to kind of slow consultation and then trying to get the capital into place afterwards. I think communication and trying to continue having a conversation, like a fluid conversation, to explain why you're looking at doing things. It's a difficult thing for us to balance our sort of tourism-centred work with everything else we do. Even though I fully believe that anything that supports the tourist does actually support our residents, but trying to kind of get that across I think that's probably the secret. I'm not saying I've worked out how to do it, but I really do think that getting people to understand that managing visitors is actually better for your community. And you know, here it was industry here. This is why the place has built up and developed and it's changed over time. And actually it's not really a shock. We live in a beautiful place, so people want to come visit it. And I guess we've got to share. So, you know, the more we can do that sustainably and slowly and gently, the better for everybody involved, I think. What's next for us? We're still developing some of the capital work that have come out of our own strategy. Our camper van parking, for instance. We are just launching e-bike hire for tourists. We've spent some time working with our community with e-bikes first, but we always knew we'd have to use the e-bikes with the tourists. One, because it's not really being done in the area anyway. Two, it promotes active travel and green health, and three, it would be a good income stream for us to keep them available to the community, because we're doing that for free or a suggested donation of £5 that a resident can take them out. So hopefully to keep that going, we can get some money from the tourist hire. And again, that shows that nice balance of utilising our visitors to support the residents. So I hope we can continue to do that, because it's a lovely opportunity for folk. I think probably our biggest challenge is actually trying to maintain the balance of the numbers of people that are coming here with what we can actually provide. And you know, we're seeing it locally elsewhere, how difficult it is when the balance is tipped, and how devastating that can be for the environment and the people. And I think eventually for the visitors themselves, because if you can't look after the place that they're coming to visit, you know, I wonder what legislation might have to be brought in order to look after things. So I think for our part, it will be how can we sustainably manage the amount of people that are coming here in a happy way that the residents are happy with.
With our focus on thriving places in this episode, it's time now to hear about a new social enterprise working towards that goal of growing tourism in a way that benefits both our businesses and our communities too. Here to tell us all about Isle Holiday is Rhoda Meek, a digital consultant living in Tiree who created Isle20.com, a business directory for the Scottish Islands, and founded the community interest company Isles Develop. Rhoda, thanks so much for joining us today. Now, before you tell us all about your latest venture, which aims to take on Airbnb, can you tell us about how you got here?
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's one of those quite random stories of just how my life seems to kind of turn out. Just as COVID struck, I'd started a little tea business called Tiree Tea, and I was planning to sell branded tea bags to tourists with little stories about Tiree on them. I wanted a kind of nice, authentic product that would make people smile. And I had 70,000 tea bags in the spare room, and we hit lockdown. I just left a contract with an IT company. And so I thought, okay, it's not a great position to be in. I've got a year's sell-by date on these. I'm going to have to do something. And I've worked with computers and websites kind of all my life, really. And I thought, right, I'll do a business directory and we'll try and send some traffic to all of these small businesses in the islands. Many people, who normally stock shops and craft fairs and all of that kind of thing, and were suddenly without income, without traffic and visitors. So I set up a business directory, and that then morphed into an e-commerce platform because some people weren't actually selling online, they were selling through a Facebook page. And you've got that funnel really drops off then in terms of sales. And so I bolted on an e-commerce platform. I had no idea what I was letting myself in for, and ended up creating Isle20, which is a shopping site where you can buy things from sellers across the Scottish Islands. And I wasn't comfortable profiting from that because it was going through my books. And I realized that, one of the big challenges we have in the islands is a short season. And there is quite a reliance. Different islands to different extents rely on tourism and on tourist footfall. But that is a short period of time in the year. And, I think we could all do with looking at how we can be more resilient going forward. And COVID certainly brought that to the fore. And one of the things we can do in the islands is extend our tourist season or extend our selling season. And so I thought, well, there's probably a future for Isle20. I hope there's a future for Isle20 beyond COVID. And so I turned it into a social enterprise. And the idea was to try and put our profits and any surplus back into supporting small businesses. People kept saying to me, but what about housing? But what about housing? And I kept trying to ignore it. Not because it's a massive issue in the islands, but it just felt so big and so huge and so really hard to grapple with because it's so complex. But the thing is that you can't have, businesses year round in the islands if there aren't homes for people year round in the islands. And so, I'd been joking for quite a long time about, we should do Isle20, but for houses, we should take on Airbnb. And it started to become less of a joke. And actually, well, what if, the houses that are let on a short-term basis in the islands, what if some of them signed up with us, as well as other, Airbnb, booking.com, it's not an either or. What if they signed up with us and if we manage to get the booking on their behalf, we take a commission, and that commission doesn't get offshored, it doesn't go to California. It comes to us in the islands, and we use it to support housing projects, and we use it to support other small businesses and try and really help our islands to thrive, as well as raising awareness of the issue. And that was the goal. So we set up Isle Holiday over the course of last year, and we launched kind of in November to try and get property owners on board. And now we've got some properties where we're trying to get the word out that we exist. It's a tough one. Market penetration isn't going to be easy, but it's exciting. And I think, it's been well received. I think people understand that, you can't just ask people to sell a house. You can't just ask them to stop letting it. People have houses for many, many reasons, but, maybe there's a sort of middle way that we could try and make the situation work better.
Yeah. And what has been the reaction from islanders about this idea?
It's been really interesting, the response. So, when we first brought up the idea and floated it, people firstly thought we were slightly mad. They're right. And then that it was a really good idea. I think islanders have been the people signing up to put their properties online. because they see it firsthand. They have in Tyree, I believe we had a teacher who pulled out of a job offer because they couldn't get a house. Now, if you're at that stage in a community, that's a danger point, because we can't get people living here who can do the jobs that we need to do. How do you staff a voluntary fire service if young people can't stay and live? And I think Islanders really understand that. But, I have half of my house is let out when family aren't here, because that subsidises income. So there's many, many reasons for having these houses. And I think Islanders understand that better than most. And they're the ones who are wanting to sign up and really, get it. I'm still hoping that more people who maybe don't live in the islands but have houses will participate, because I'd love it if we could kind of bridge that divide. It's not about vilifying people. No one's set out to cause a housing crisis, and I'd love it if more people felt able to join us and sort of tackle it with us.
So what are the benefits then, if you're going to sell this to some people watching who might have self-catering properties that could advertise through you? Tell us what the benefits are then of doing that, apart from the obvious one of keeping the money within the community.
Yeah, apart from that feel-good feeling of doing good for the community, absolutely. So you would get a listing with us on the Isle Holiday website. And we're also offering people their own website. So if people don't have a website, we would also create a page for them. They can have their own domain name. They can have, if they don't already have a Visit Scotland listing, for example, we will do that for them. We've got a really knowledgeable team that we're building, and we're building up information packs around the new short-term letting legislation that's coming in. And one of the things that we hope to be able to do is really support people in working their way through that process. And so we're already starting to create the resources that are needed to do that, because it's something that we hope will help rural areas, but we're also really cognizant of the fact that it's a lot to ask of people, and it's going to be quite scary for people. And so we're hoping that we'll be able to, one of the benefits of signing up with us, we'll be able to provide that service. We've also got someone on the end of a phone, real people in real places. And that, I think, makes a difference, as well as being able to give your guest a much better experience, because they're getting those tailored emails, they're getting the information about places, we're giving them their hints and their tips. And hopefully it's that will really provide that extra layer of experience. And I think people's guests are looking for that. They're not looking for the generic experience. They're looking for a bit more tailored, a bit more, I hesitate to use the word authentic, but a kind of more authentic experience is what people are wanting. They want to kind of get under the skin of a place, and we're very much about the community first and the destination second. That there's much more to our beaches than the Instagram experience. There's the people who live around them and all of that gives a richness to an experience.
Yeah, and as you say, it's not just a feel-good factor for the businesses getting involved, or the people who have properties and doing the right thing there, but the visitors too. And there is certainly a trend now for people looking for more responsible ways of travelling, and that they're spending their money in a way that does actually benefit the places that they're going.
Because we're quite specific and we understand islands and we have an island-based team, when someone books to go to, say, Mull, we can send them an email about things that are happening in Mull. We can tell them about great projects, we can tell them about things to support, we can tell them that where the mobile phone signal works and where it doesn't, that there's no cash point in Tyree. And those are all things that will really, I hope, make a much more authentic and nice experience if we're setting people's expectations and we're telling them about places they can go and things they can do. And people having a real affinity with the islands, and I think they increasingly want to feel like they've experienced something and had experiences. And that's coming off the back of COVID as well. People have a new appetite for experiencing things and going to places. And I'm hoping that by offering a service from Islanders, we can really enrich the experience that guests have. That can only be beneficial for property owners.
Absolutely. So before we let you go, Rhoda, if people want to get in touch and get involved, how can they do that?
Isleholiday.com is the place to go, and just we should come up in Google, but isleholiday.com, and all the information is there. You'll see the website. We've also got some stories of some businesses that we've already been able to help with the small surplus that we have been able to generate. And we're just really excited for the future, because if we can make this work and we can take people with us and get them on board, then we have the opportunity to reinvest in our communities in a way that means that these communities will be here to welcome guests for well into the future.
Absolutely, and it's all about creating that sort of sustainable success for the future. Well, Rhoda, thank you so much for joining us today, and best of luck.
Thank you.